Hello and welcome to this edition of FYI. I'm Elaine Chang Baxter, the Director of Partnerships for Montgomery County Public Schools. With us today in the studio is Mark Eckstein. Mark is the Montgomery County Council of PTAs LGBTQ Committee Chair. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So last year, the Board of Education revised the guidelines for students' gender identity. What do these guidelines help to clarify? And then what do you want the public to know about the guidelines?
Yes, so the guidelines are a really good resource that the Board of Education and MCPS has revised over the last few years, and they really offer kind of a roadmap for students and families and staff kind of dealing with gender identity issues within the school. So they kind of outline things about bathroom use and sporting events and sport facility uses like the locker rooms. A big component of the guidelines has to deal with name changes. So a lot of our middle school and high school students are looking to have a name change and a gender change for gender identity reasons. And so the guidelines outline steps in which the school system can kind of help in those regards as well. So I would just invite people to check out the guidelines. They're 4 pages. Some of it is a bit complicated, and so it's probably best to just look at it and use it as a resource. And an addendum to the guideline is this very important document which allows the families and the students and the staff to go through and kind of customize it to exactly what the student needs, and then it's kept at the school with the principal, and it can be looked at in case there are questions.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And then that can transfer with the student as they matriculate up.
Sure, and we, kind of the industry best practices is to revisit it very often, maybe every 6 months, and definitely keep it going throughout the whole experience of the student in MCPS. For the reason that a lot of these experiences are very fluid and changing, and it's just best to kind of keep the communication open. And,
and make sure what's comfortable for the student. Okay.
Yeah.
So you wear a much bigger hat also because you're the chair of the LGBTQ committee. So can you share who's encompassed within the LGBTQ committee? Because you just talked about gender identity, but it encompasses so much more. And then ultimately, how can staff, ideally, and the community in general, which includes parents, central office staff, you know, businesses out there, how can we help to support students that that fall under this umbrella?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because the guidelines for gender identity kind of deal with one part, which would be our gender identity component, and then we have the L, the GB. The T is really more with gender identity, and we have a Q, and sometimes we go I and A. We just had an LGBTQ IA forum, and we wanted to make sure we used the title as inclusive as possible. So I'm going to include some resources at the end, which can go into some more detail of kind of what this whole umbrella LGBTQ IA kind of means. But another way that that people are looking at it is GSM, kind of like the gender and sexual orientation minorities. And so it's a way to kind of encompass this broad range of people that are often more marginalized and vulnerable. And so in terms of helping, there's so much that can be done just through simple awareness. My committee with MCC PTA has really been working in partnership with the school system and also groups like PFLAG and GLSEN and the Human Rights Campaign, which offer lots of resources to support these types of efforts. And the main thing that I think we can do is kind of build awareness and also kind of an affirming environment where those students know that they are accepted and welcomed into the school culture and such. And so the best thing I think is, you know, ultimately there can be budget stuff and trainings and things like that, but I think the first step needs to be just inclusive language. And if certain students parents are LGBT or it comes up in a classroom discussion, just to be very affirming of these folks and kind of know that they are a significant part of our family, MCPS family.
So you as the chair, could you be a good point of contact for someone, you and I had discussed earlier, people might not know about using the right terminology, they might be afraid, they're not sure what's politically correct.
That's right.
But we were discussing the need really more for people to be more proactive and interacting with someone in a safe way to find out what actually is the terminology I should be using, or do I have the right understanding of what this term means.
Yes.
So you would be a good point of contact for someone to have that safe conversation if they're trying to learn more about.
Yeah, and we have committee members and myself, and I'm going to leave our committee email, and we get questions all the time because a lot of times email is a way to kind of have that privacy, but also ask those questions that maybe we're uncomfortable ask in public. I mean, today with all the political correctness, we often find one of the biggest barriers and the challenges is just having conversations because people aren't necessarily comfortable with some of the terminology, and the terminology and the various ways we refer to these experiences change very rapidly. And it's really what we always say is it's just following the student, following the individual. And so labels and such are very important, but it's really ultimately important to kind of follow the student, because the students often don't know how to label it. And so I often tell the students and staff members working with the students is that, we want to kind of label so we can get the supports and stuff, but ultimately there's no pressure to do so. We just, everyone's along this continuum and just try to meet the students where they are and tell them they're just fine. And if things change later in life, that's perfectly fine. All right. So less pressure on the individual. And yes, the committee would be more than happy to answer questions. And also we've done kind of informal trainings and talks with certain departments and certain subsets of student population where we just get people in the room and just say, hey, ask us anything. Don't worry if you say it the wrong way. And that, I think, has proven to be quite successful. In fact, that was the premise of the LGBTQI forum that we just held a couple weeks ago. MCC PTA partnered with MCPS to have the first of its kind event. And we had over 250 people show up. And just conversations like this that really have led to a lot of positive changes.
What do you think is like the number one challenge that you hear from students? If we're trying to capture something for the public to know, what would students like as far as support for them?
I think it's kind of twofold. And as we talked at the beginning, there's kind of somewhat of a separation between gender identity issues, which would be dealing with transgender students, gender nonconforming, non-binary students, and then the other part, which we would think of as more gay and lesbian students. So they tend to have different concerns. And for the gender identity experiences, I think a very big concern is kind of name and gender experiences with our students. So for example, if a child is transitioning or coming out, may be born what we would call female, and then now expressing themselves with a gender expression more in terms of a male, that student really wants to be kind of recognized. And it's in our culture, it's hard to change our gender and our names. In fact, in Maryland, there's extremely restrictive laws to do so. You have to actually publish your name for 30 days. So if you want to change your name, in privacy, you have to announce it to the whole world. So it's this law that we're trying to change on the state level. But in the meantime, MCPS has been wonderful, and they are the first in the state to come up with a guideline and a protocol to actually support our students doing this. And so that is allowing our students to quickly change names and gender, with parent involvement and the principal and such, and really the first in the state and one of the first in the country to actually allow this. So we're really appreciative to MCPS and very grateful of the supports that they give. Yeah, go ahead.
So we kind of need to wrap up, but and there's so much more we could talk to. We had talked about locker room and curriculum.
Yes.
So if we were to emphasize again a website or resources, what could you share?
Right. So there are some great resources. The Human Rights Campaign has a wonderful website called Welcoming Schools.
Okay.
And so they outline curriculum and certain topics in there. And then another national organization is GLSEN, and we'll put the emails up. And those are dedicated resources strictly for K through 12 students. So you'll find support of the GSA clubs and curriculum issues, bathroom issues. And again, like we talked about, I'd be happy to answer any specific, because a lot of these are just really specific to the family.
Okay. And then does the MCC PTA also have information on the MCC PTA website?
Yes, exactly. Yes, we have it on our website, and then each of our committees has a separate section. So we have a lot of resources there as well.
So if there are future events, someone could go to the MCC PTA website and see that posted.
Yes.
And hopefully more people will just come out and learn more, what's the appropriate language and how do I support.
Exactly.
And I think the plan for students to have, a touch point, what pronoun are we using for the student to make sure that we're respecting the student is all great. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
We are.
Maybe not as fast as we need to, but we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, no, this engagement is very, very good. So I appreciate being here.
Great. Thank you for watching. I'm Elaine Chang Baxter. I'm the Director of Partnerships. Join us next time on FYI.